I never imagined the person who promised to stand by me would be the one who signed the papers that started it all. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Corinne Hadley, and I am 34 years old. I live in a small Ohio town with my husband Weston, a quiet man who works as a contractor. We were not rich, but our life felt steady and good. My mother had been sick for almost a year, and I spent most weekends driving to see her, sitting by her bed, holding her hand while she talked about old memories. When she finally passed, the house felt empty in a way I had never known before. I thought the hardest part would be learning to live without her voice on the phone every Sunday. But soon I noticed something strange in my brother Briggs. He used to call me every few days just to check in, just to talk. Now his calls stopped. When I tried reaching him, he would answer short and cold, like he was in a hurry to hang up. He started visiting Mom's house often, going through drawers and papers without telling me what he was looking for. I told myself it was grief making him act different. But deep down, I knew something else was starting, something that would test everything I trusted. A week later, Weston came home from the hardware store looking uneasy. He told me he had run into Briggs there, and Briggs had mentioned setting up a meeting with our mother's lawyer. I asked when, and Weston said he did not know. Briggs had said it quickly and walked off before he could ask more. That night I called Briggs and asked him directly why he was meeting the lawyer without telling me. He sighed like I was overreacting and said he was just handling some logistics, papers that needed signing, nothing I needed to worry about. I told him I was Mom's daughter too, and I deserved to know what was happening with her estate. He said he would fill me in later and hung up before I could say anything else. I turned to Weston for support, expecting him to be as bothered as I was. Instead, he told me to calm down and just let Briggs handle it, said family things were easier without fighting over paperwork. I could not understand it. Weston was not a man who backed away from unfairness, not in our marriage, not with our neighbors, not even with his own brothers. Yet here he was, asking me to stay quiet while my brother made decisions behind my back. The more I pushed, the more Weston seemed to want the conversation to end. I lay awake that night wondering what exactly he already knew. Thanksgiving came, and the whole family gathered at my Aunt Marin's house like every year. But this year felt different, heavy, like everyone was avoiding my eyes. My aunt pulled me into the kitchen and told me quietly that Briggs had been calling relatives, saying I was too emotional right now to make clear decisions about Mom's house and her savings. I felt my face go hot with anger and shame at the same time. Sitting at that dinner table, I noticed cousins nodding along whenever Briggs spoke about keeping things simple and not dragging this out. Others looked at me with soft, pitying eyes, like they had already decided I would lose whatever this was turning into. Nobody asked me what I wanted or what Mom had actually told me before she passed. That night, back home, I woke up thirsty and walked past Weston sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone lit up. He snapped it shut the moment he saw me and mumbled something about work messages. I did not believe him. A cold feeling settled in my chest, one I could not shake off. This was no longer just about a house or savings account. It was about who truly stood with me, and I was starting to fear the answer included fewer people than I had ever imagined, maybe not even my own husband. One evening I went out to Weston's truck to grab my umbrella and saw a manila folder sitting on the seat. Something told me to open it, and when I did, my hands started shaking. Inside was a property agreement, already signed by Briggs, splitting Mom's house in a way that left me with almost no real say. My name was printed on one line, but further down, it gave Weston power of attorney over what it called my portion. I never signed anything like that, and I never agreed to let Weston control my share of anything. I carried the folder inside and waited for him at the kitchen table, my heart pounding harder with every passing minute. When he walked in and saw the papers in front of me, his face went pale. I asked him straight out how long he had been working with Briggs on this. He finally admitted it had been weeks, meetings after work, calls I never knew about. He said he did it because I was too deep in grief to think clearly, that he was only trying to protect me. Standing in my own kitchen, under lights I had picked out with my mother, I felt something inside me break. The two men I trusted most in this world had been quietly deciding my future without ever once asking what I wanted. The next morning, still shaken, I drove to Mom's house and began going through her old filing cabinet, searching for anything that could explain what was happening. Tucked behind old tax papers, I found a folder of handwritten letters in her familiar handwriting. In them, she wrote clearly that she wanted the house to go to me, and her savings account to go to Briggs. She had planned this months before she passed, and neither of them had ever mentioned it to me. Piece by piece, things started making sense. Briggs must have found these letters early, maybe during one of his visits when he went through her drawers. I remembered Weston once mentioning a business loan he owed Briggs from a failed venture a few years back, money he never fully paid off. Briggs must have used that debt as leverage, pressuring Weston to help him rewrite the story before the will was ever officially read. Every quiet meeting, every late-night text, every logistics excuse had really been the two of them planning how to convince me to give up what my mother wanted me to have. This was not just about money anymore. It was personal, deliberate, and far more painful than I had let myself believe. My own husband had helped plan it. The day for the formal will reading finally arrived, and the lawyer's office was packed with family members sitting on stiff chairs, waiting. I sat near the front, nervous but hopeful that the truth from Mom's letters would finally come out. Before the lawyer could even begin, Briggs stood up and turned to face everyone. He said in a loud, clear voice that I had spent Mom's final months manipulating her, twisting her feelings so she would change her wishes to favor me. Gasps filled the room, and I heard whispers spreading from chair to chair like fire through dry grass. I looked at Weston, waiting for him to say something all at once. For nearly 2 weeks after that day, I barely spoke to anyone. I moved through the house doing small tasks, cooking, cleaning, staring at walls, but my mind stayed stuck on that room full of whispers and Weston's silence. Slowly, something inside me began to shift. The sadness did not disappear, but it started turning into something firmer, something steady. I decided I would not let this go unanswered. I searched around and found an attorney named Tatum Reyes, someone who handled contested estate cases, and came highly recommended by a coworker. I sat in her office and laid out everything, the letters, the folder from Weston's truck, the strange meetings, all of it. She listened carefully and told me we needed proof, real documents, not just my memory of conversations. I went back to Mom's files and carefully organized every letter and bank statement I could find that showed her true wishes. I also asked Ms. Reyes to request records connected to the old business loan between Weston and Briggs, sensing that debt was the real reason behind everything that had happened. For the first time since losing my mother, I felt something besides grief settling into my chest. I felt certain, and I felt ready to fight for the truth. A week later, Ms. Reyes called me into her office with news that made my stomach drop. She had found that Briggs forged the signature date on the property agreement, making it look like it was signed earlier than it actually was. Even worse, Weston had helped backdate the notarization stamp to make the whole document appear legal and official. I sat there quietly, feeling anger settle deep into my bones, but I did not rush home to confront either of them. Instead, Ms. Reyes suggested a smarter path. I started acting like I was still willing to cooperate, agreeing to attend a mediation session that Briggs and Weston clearly expected to end in my surrender. At home, I stayed calm, answered their questions plainly, and gave nothing away. During preparation for the mediation, Ms. Reyes formally requested the original notarized files instead of accepting the copies Briggs had handed out to the rest of the family. When Briggs heard about that request, his usual confidence cracked, and he started avoiding phone calls again. Weston noticed the shift too, and one night, watching me quietly organize papers at the kitchen table, his face changed. He finally realized I already knew far more than I had ever let on, and that realization seemed to shake him deeply. The mediation room felt cold and quiet as we all took our seats around the long table, Briggs and Weston on one side, me and Ms. Reyes on the other. She opened her folder and calmly laid out everything, the forged signature date, the backdated notarization, and finally Mom's original letters showing exactly what she wanted for the house and her savings. The family attorney leaned forward, studying each document carefully, his expression growing more serious with every page. Briggs's face lost its usual confidence, and his hands started shaking as he tried to explain himself. He finally broke down and admitted he had panicked over debts he owed and convinced Weston to help him fix the paperwork before anyone could ask questions. Every head in the room turned toward Weston next, waiting. He sat there pale and silent for a long moment before finally speaking, his voice shaking as he admitted he had agreed out of guilt, afraid of losing Briggs's friendship, not out of any love or loyalty toward me. I felt something painful settle in my chest hearing those words, confirmation of what I had already feared. The relatives who had once doubted me sat frozen, silent, finally understanding that I had been telling the truth from the very beginning. A few weeks after mediation, the court made its final decision. The house was awarded to me exactly as my mother had planned, and Briggs was ordered to repay the money he had wrongly used, along with facing separate legal trouble for forging the document. Part of me expected to feel triumphant, but mostly I just felt tired, like I had been carrying a heavy weight for far too long. Things between Weston and me never went back to normal after that. We tried talking a few times, but every conversation circled back to the same question. How could I ever trust him again after everything he had hidden from me? Within a year, we quietly separated, no dramatic fights, just two people accepting that something important had broken beyond repair. I packed my things and moved back into Mom's house, the one she always wanted me to have. The first thing I did was repaint the kitchen in the soft yellow color she had always loved, but never got around to finishing herself. Slowly, I started rebuilding my days around honesty, choosing friendships and habits that felt real instead of ones built on quiet obligation. Standing in that kitchen one evening, sunlight coming through the window, I finally felt something close to peace, knowing the truth and my mother's true wishes had finally won.